بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. It has always confused me how some people in the name of religion, in the name of al-mashayikha or scholarship, would claim meaningless positions and even worse, meaningless titles. It has always annoyed me that a person who is a descendant of the Prophet ﷺ calls himself Sayyid, and I've always thought of this as an inappropriate behavior. I've never seen a companion or even a scholar who comes from the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ who would call himself a Sayyid or a Sharif. On the other hand, when scholars give themselves alqab, they are true and they are meaningful. For instance, for a scholar to be called Shihabuddin or Shamsuddin or something like this, even when it indicates praising oneself, or so it appears, it's meaningful. But calling one Sharif just because you come from the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ, it's very problematic. I say so as a scholar, and I say so as a person who does not lack that nasab in the first place, and I will just leave it there without explaining that part. But I can't speak because I'm not lacking this, and I find it a little bit problematic that you call yourself this. If it comes from other people, it makes sense. Similarly, scholars, when they receive their titles, for instance, it's customary for a scholar whose name is Ahmed to be called Shihabuddin, and for a scholar whose name is Muhammad is to be called Shamsuddin or Badruddin or so. And there are so many nice and beautiful alqab that scholars have that indicate the involvement in scholarship, the dedication to al-ilm al-sharif. This made me think about al-Hanabila, who rarely claimed any titles, any positions, who would escape from positions given to them by authorities or by the heads of the states, by Salatin, a sultan or a caliph or anyone like that. It's very rare for a Hanbali to be a qadi, to be a judge. It's very rare for a Hanbali to be a wazir or an official person or an emir or something like this. It's very rare for a Hanbali to be found in these positions. And it was always about honor and scholarship, knowledge, honor and scholarship. I always thought that Mount Qasioun in Bilad al-Sham, that Mount Qasioun had that perfect resemblance. It's as if it symbolizes the Hanbali madhab. The vast majority of al-Hanabila, Hanbali scholars are buried there. It's the only place where you can easily find, where you can assume easily that Hanbali is buried there, the foothill of Mount Qasioun. These scholars who were buried there, they do not lack anything. They didn't have to be the scholars of a sultan. They didn't have to be, a scholar of a sultan is not necessarily bad, yes, but they didn't have to be the scholars of a sultan. They didn't have to be called Qadi al-Qudah, and this title comes with so many benefits. They didn't have to be the shuyukh of the greatest madaris, the greatest schools of the Islamic world. They didn't have to be all that, yet they remained great figures, great models. This might sound repetitive now, but I always attribute this to the fact that Al-Hanabila are people who follow a madhab that has everything. The Hanbali fiqh, the Hanbali aqaid, and the Hanbali tasawwuf of Sidi Abdul Qadir al-Jilani radiyallahu anhu. I'm not trying to say that people who are Hanafis or who belong to any other madhab, or people who come from different different backgrounds when it comes to al-aqidah or so. I do not mean or do not think that it's appropriate for anyone to stop following the tariqah of Sidi Abdul Qadir just because he was Hanbali. When I was growing up, I kept hearing from people that he was Shafi and then he turned to the Hanbali madhab to save it. And we now know for sure, and this is something that the only preacher would say, we now know for sure that this was a fabricated story, a lie, that he became Hanbali to save the Hanbali madhab. He was not anything but Hanbali. From the very beginning, he was not anything but Hanbali. And if you see how Sidi Abdul Qadir talks about Imam Ahmad radiyallahu anhu, as if he's talking about his spiritual guide to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though Sidi Abdul Qadir received the tasawwuf properly from great figures and great mashayikh of tasawwuf, and his sanad to Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib and to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a bright chain. What made me think about all this is the fact that the Shami scholars of Bayt al-Maqdis and other places in Bilad al-Sham, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free Bayt al-Maqdis, when they travelled to that area, and consequently they started being buried there in the foothill of Mount Qasioun. These people actually received the tasawwuf directly or indirectly from Sayyidi Abdul Qadir radiallahu anhu. They were not people of dunya, they were people of al-akhirah, and they were people of al-ilm. Sometimes I care a lot about that distinction. Listen, you'll have to sacrifice something in order to be a scholar. You might sacrifice, I can't say tasawwuf, never. You might sacrifice the higher levels, the higher practices of self-purification, because you are engaging with these topics of al-fiqh and these issues of al-ilm. You will have to be a slightly different person than a person who is devoted completely to purifying himself, seeking the guidance of a shaykh, and above all that, the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the reason why al-ilm or scholarship is a shortcut. If you succeed, the reward is high, but it's risky. This is the reason why it has been mentioned in some of the hadiths of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that one of the very first types who would go to the hellfire is a scholar. Similarly, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam talked about judges, it's a ratio of 2 to 1. Yes. So it can easily be assumed that a lot of judges are going to the hellfire. Judges are supposed to be scholars, unless he sallallahu alaihi wasallam meant judges in general, everyone will be fulfilling this job even when they are not qualified, even when they disregard the sharia of Allah, even when they neglect the existence of al-fiqh and they start implementing the laws written or designed and tailored by a stupid human being. Hopefully this would be the case, otherwise it's not a very promising future. Let's circle back to the Hanabila who were buried in that area. I always think about that, and I always think about the heritage of the Hanbali scholars and the discrimination against them. In one of my drus, one of the students asked me to talk on YouTube about how Al-Hanabila were treated that way, discriminated against, and how Al-Hanabila were, let's say, treated unfairly. I do not want to talk about this now, actually. I just want to talk about those Hanabila, not from the perspective that they have been exposed to this treatment, but from the perspective that they were great figures, great scholars who protected the legacy and the knowledge of Imam Ahmad radiallahu anhu, and unlike other students or companions of A'imma, they sometimes, I would say, distorted, and I do not talk about the four A'imma, by the way, I'm talking about other A'imma, distorted their teachings, or they were careless and they couldn't preserve their knowledge. They always say so about Layth ibn Sa'd, a great faqih, a great Egyptian faqih. They used to say Layth is a better faqih than Malik. I'm not sure I subscribe to that. I would say they were probably the same level when it comes to al-fiqh. Yeah, but his students, they say ضيعوه. They let go of his knowledge. They couldn't preserve, they couldn't save it and keep it for next generations to receive it, and so on. A great service of those Hanabila in Bilad al-Sham, especially al-Maqadisa, those who originally came from Bayt al-Maqdis and settled there. A great service that they did to the Hanbali madhab. You think about people like Shaykh al-Islam al-Muwaffaq, Din al-Maqdisi, and Shaykh ibn Abi Umar, and so many other people. I can't count the number of people who lived, taught, and who were eventually buried there. Let's show some appreciation to our scholars instead of being caught always in these meaningless fights of our modern day, the Wahhabiyya, and you have all these labels: the Wahhabiyya, Neo-Hanbaliyya, Taymi Hanbaliyya, something else, and Ash'ariyya, and the Ash'ariyya who like philosophy, and the Ash'ariyya who like tasawwuf, and the Ash'ariyya who do not like anything. Yani forget about that. If you are Hanbali, if you do not have a problem with the Hanbali madhab, because a lot of people would have problems with the Hanbali madhab nowadays, especially when we try not to be, how do I say this in a good way, when we try to keep our identity, our independent identity, without accepting any foreign interference, let's say, imposition. Wallahu musta'an. I wrote a poem. I have never shared my poetry on YouTube, but I usually write about other subjects. But this, on the other hand, is written and dedicated to the scholars of Bilad al-Sham, especially the scholars who lived during that golden era of the Hanbali mazhab, maybe from the 6th century until maybe the 8th century, late 8th century, early 6th century, or even late 9th century and early 6th century. I will recite this too, and I hope you would think about its meaning, and inshallah you will be able to understand what I'm trying to say. Because I do not think my words so far in this video can carry the meanings to you of what I want to say about that that portion of Hanbali scholarship. I would like to visit Mount Qasioun one day, and I think I will be singing this on my way to Mount Qasioun. This is a poem entitled The Road to Mount Qasioun. Beneath Qasioun the winds arise, a hymn of solemn grace. The echo where the faithful walked, their trials etched in place. No crowns adorn its sacred stones, no worldly triumphs stand, but whispers of the steadfast ones who passed with dust in hand. A path of thorns, a road unseen where hearts are worn and bare, each step a covenant with truth, each breath a fleeting prayer. No treasures wait, no fleeting fame, no ease to light the climb. Yet those who rise to Qasiyoun ascend beyond all time. O Qasiyoun, the mountain calls where silence sings his name. Each shadow speaks of mercy's weight, each rock resists the flame. The air is thin, the soul laid bare, no mask, no pride remains. For those who walk to Qasiyoun are bound by sacred chains. Beneath its heights the scholars sat, in chains yet firm as steel, reciting truth that none could break, no hardship make them kneel. For in the stillness of its shade the dunya fades away, and what remains is tawḥīd's light to guide the hearts that pray. No banner waves, no trumpet sounds, its summit bears no throne, but silence vast as mercy's sea, where none but Allah's known. Step softly here, the mountain speaks to those who seek His name. It lifts no man, it humbles all, it burns the self in flame. O Qasiyoun, the mountain calls where silence sings His name. Each shadow speaks of mercy's weight, each rock resists the flame. The air is thin, the soul laid bare, no mask, no pride remains. For those who walk to Qasiyoun are bound by sacred chains. When all the world has turned to dust, and all its thrones are gone, the mountain shall remain as firm as truth it rests upon. And those who tread its solemn path, their names may fade like dew, but Qasiyoun keeps their prayers alive, the pure, the just, the true. I hope it resonates with you, and I hope you think about its meanings, and I think the text of the poem will be shared with you somewhere on the comments or the description. I'm not familiar with this. Barakallahu feekum, jazakumullahu khairan. See you inshallah in another video. And if you want to suggest something that needs to be discussed on YouTube, that can't be discussed, or that should not be discussed, or time should not be wasted on it in the classes of al-ilm, please do not write a comment. Write a comment with the salah al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and write a comment with kalimat al-tawḥīd, that because of which everyone survives. La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Or write a comment with the tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that it might drown the stupid comments of people who might not be interested in true Islam, especially those who claim the name of Islam. Otherwise, if you want anything to be conveyed to me as a suggestion, I suggest that you approach one of our students, if you are not one of our students, to approach one of our students and to send your suggestions with him or her. I think this is the only way I can communicate with anyone, because I have been off social media for some time now. Barakallahu feekum. See you inshallah in another video on YouTube. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.